Hi friends, I welcome you all to this exciting training session being conducted by TNV Academy. Let me explain to you what we will be covering in this session. In today's session, we will be covering the clause 6.1.2 Hazard Identification and Assessment of Risks and Opportunities. The above clause is part of the clause 6 Planning. This clause comes under the plan part of the Plan, Do, Check, Act PDCA cycle or process approach. Now let us understand about the internal references taken by clause 6.1.2 of ISO 45001-2018. As far as clause 6.1.2 is concerned, this takes reference from the clause 8.1.3 of the standard. Also, Annexure A defines a list of terms and definitions and their meaning used within the standard under several clauses so that there is no misinterpretation on any of the terms. Now let me tell you what are the key learnings, takeaways from this session. At the end of this session, you will be able to understand what is the difference between a hazard and risk, how to identify hazards and carry out risk assessment, how to prioritize the actions towards the occupational health and safety, risk and opportunities. So let's begin our discussion regarding the subclause 6.1 Actions to Address Risks and Opportunities. So let's begin our discussion with a brief definition of hazard and hazard identification process. If we talk about the basic definition of hazard, then we can say that any object, situation or behavior that has a potential to cause injury, ill health or damage to property or the environment. Hazard can also be stated as the roadblocks in an organization's path for achieving health and safety objectives. Health and safety hazards exist in every workplace. Some are easily identified and corrected, while others are necessary risks of the job and must be managed in other ways. For example, using protective equipments. Most occupational hazards are inactive or have a low potential of actually occurring. However, employers must be prepared to deal with them since a hazard becoming active can generate an emergency situation. Hazards can appear in many occupational circumstances. Some hazards are acute and pose an immediate danger to the health and physical integrity of the worker or guest on the premises. Others take a longer time to materialize, and this may cause a long-term effect, as is the case for certain chemicals, vapors, dust, and radiation that may lead to chronic medical conditions. Let us now discuss the requirements of subclause 6.1.2.1, which talks about hazard identification process in detail. The subclause 6.1.2.1 states that the organization shall establish, implement, and maintain processes for hazard identification that is ongoing and proactive. The processes shall take into account, but not limited to, how the work is organized, social factors including workload, work hours, victimization, harassment and bullying, leadership and culture in the organization, routine and non-routine activities and situations including hazards arising from infrastructure, equipment, materials, substances, and physical conditions of workplace. Product and service design, research, development, testing, production, assembly, construction, service delivery, maintenance and disposal. Human factors, how the work is performed, past relevant incidents, internal or external to the organization, including emergencies and their causes, potential emergency situations, people including consideration of those with access to the workplace and their activities, including workers, contractors, visitors and other persons, those in the vicinity of the workplace who can be affected by the activities of the organization, workers at a location not under the direct control of the organization, other issues including consideration of the design of work areas, processes, installations, machinery and equipment, operating procedures, and work organization, including their adaptation to the needs and capabilities of the workers involved. Situations occurring in the vicinity of the workplace caused by work-related activities under the control of the organization. Situations not controlled by the organization and occurring in the vicinity of the workplace that can cause injury and ill health to the persons in the workplace. Actual or proposed changes in the organization, operations, processes, activities, and Occupational Health and Safety Management System as per 8.1.3 Management of Change. Changes in knowledge and information about hazards. The overall purpose of the risk assessment process is to evaluate the hazards that arise or might arise in the course of the organization's activities and ensure that the risks to people arising from these hazards are assessed, prioritized, and controlled to eliminate the hazards and reduce the risk to acceptable levels. Hazards have the potential to cause injury or ill health. They need to be identified before the risk associated with these hazards can be assessed, and if no controls exist or existing controls are ineffective, then effective controls should be implemented according to the hierarchy of controls. Hazard identification should aim to determine proactively all sources, situations, or acts, or a combination of all these, arising from an organization's activities with a potential for harm in terms of injury or ill health. Examples can be sources of hazard, for example, moving machinery, radiation or energy sources; situations, example, working in confined spaces, working at height, etc. Acts, example, manual handling, wearing PPE, etc. Hazard identification should consider the different types of hazards in the workplace, including physical hazards. These are the most common hazards, and they include extremes of temperature, ionizing or non-ionizing radiation, excessive noise, electrical exposure, working from heights, and unguarded machinery. Mechanical hazards, these are usually created by machinery, often with protruding and moving parts. Chemical hazards, these appear when a worker is exposed to chemicals in the workplace. Some are safer than others, but for workers who are more sensitive to chemicals, even common solutions can cause illness, skin irritation, or breathing problems. Biological hazards, these include the viruses, bacteria, fungus, parasites, and many other living organisms that can infect and transmit diseases to human beings. The most common example is the COVID-19 pandemic, which we had suffered for the last couple of years. Ergonomic hazards, including considerations of the total physiological demands of the job upon the worker, even beyond productivity, health, and safety. Psychological hazards, these may arise from a variety of psychological factors that workers may find to be unsatisfactory, frustrating, or demoralizing, such as threat of physical violence, bullying, or intimidation. The organization's hazard identification process should take into account of the following: routine and non-routine activities such as plant cleaning and maintenance, extreme weather conditions, refurbishment, and plant startups and shutdowns. Activities of all persons having access to the workplace, including contractors, visitors, home-based workers. Human behavior, capabilities, and other human factors. Identified hazards originating outside the workplace, capable of adversely affecting the health and safety of persons under the control of the organization within the workplace. Hazards created in the vicinity of the workplace by work-related activities under the control of the organization. Infrastructure, equipment, and materials at the workplace, whether provided by the organization or others. Changes or proposed changes in the organization or its activities. Modifications to the Occupational Health and Safety Management System, including temporary changes and their impact on the operations, processes, and activities. Any applicable legal obligations relating to risk assessment and the implementation of necessary controls. The design of work areas, processes, installations, machinery and equipment, operating procedures, including the adaptation of human capabilities. Potential emergency situations. Changes in knowledge of and information about hazards, new or changed hazards. Friends, I hope that you are clear with the requirements of subclass 6.1.2.1. Now let us move forward and discuss the other important components of this session. So now we will learn about the while meeting the requirements of class 6.1.2 and 6.1.2.1. As for both of these subclasses are concerned, they do not demand an organization to keep a documented information at this step when it has finalized the hazard identification process and implemented it. The documentation part comes in the next subclass, and its requirements are clubbed with the class to maintain and documented information. Hence, we will discuss the mandatory documentation in our next session later. I am sure you all must have understood the requirements and concepts that fall under the subclass 6.1.2 of ISO 45001-2018. We have now come to the conclusion of this training session. See you soon with an exciting new topic. Till then, it's me signing off. Goodbye and thank you.